All right, in this video, I want to pick up where we left off in our last campus class. We were talking about the principal-agent problem, and keep in mind the principal is the owner, typically, of a firm, and the agent is the worker or manager of that firm. And what happens is the owner, principal, employs the agent to undertake activities that maximize profit. But the agent doesn't have that same goal. So they may engage in behaviors that are in their best interest. And we call that shirking. Some people say, well, it's laziness. Well, that's a type of shirking where, the workers and the managers are not really doing things that maximize profit because they're not getting that profit. So they pursue their own goals. So counter shirking techniques are ways of aligning the interests of the principals, the owners, and profit maximization with the behaviors of the agents, the workers, the managers. And there's the carrot and the stick analogy. I mean, you can threaten your employees with termination and with, lower pay or what have you, or you can use the carrot, which is positive kind of incentives. And one of the best ways we've found to do this is through the compensation structure. So let's just go back real quick and kind of recap. With the principal agent problem, we had these counter shirking techniques. If you pay workers based on their production piece rates, then they'll produce more. If you pay them based on their sales, then they may produce more sales. If you give them raises and promotions based on their meeting expectations, then they'll be more likely to meet those expectations. Maybe you give them a performance bonus when they achieve a goal, so they're more likely to achieve that goal. Another example is profit sharing. Why not tie their compensation directly to the profits, which is the goal of the owner? So profit sharing is a way of getting the worker to align with the owner's objectives. And that's where we left off. So let's pick up there with the next compensation system that might help counter shirking, and that's equity compensation. Equity compensation is based on the value of a company's stock. You may have heard of this. They're called stock options. What happens is some companies will offer a worker the right to purchase a certain number of the company's stock at a set price, what they call the grant price, for a period of time. So I'm just going to make up some numbers here, but let's say Starbucks offers their employees the right to purchase the stock at $50 a share for the next 2 years. So that means you could buy, it's usually a fixed number of shares. So they might say you can buy 1,000 shares at $50 a share anytime in the next 2 years. Well, you've been granted a stock option. If that 2-year period goes by, that stock option will expire if you don't use it. But during that 2-year period, you could buy up to 1,000 shares at $50. The grantee, the employee that gets this stock option, can exercise the option when the price of the stock is above the grant price. So let's say the stock goes up after a few months and it's now $60. Well, if you have the right to buy Starbucks stock at $50 and the current market price is $60, then you would want to buy that Starbucks stock at $50 and then turn around and sell it at $60. You'd make $10 a share. And if you could buy 1,000 shares, you could make 10 times 1,000, which is $10,000 as a quick profit by exercising those stock options. This incentivizes greater productivity because the higher profits that come from the company increase the stock's value. Profitability and stocks are directly tied. Profits go up, stock values go up. In fact, the primary reason that people buy stock in a company is because they want to share in the profits from that company. So it allows for workers to perform to maximize the profitability so that they can share in that profitability through the higher stock value. It's a common type of compensation for executives because their behaviors are more closely aligned with the profitability of the company. They're at a level where if they make a particular decision, it could change the company profits, and therefore it could change the value of the stock. But as you go down the hierarchy to the lower level workers, the unit workers, the people kind of in the trenches of the stores, the baristas at Starbucks, the cashiers at Starbucks, even the assistant managers, the managers, and maybe district managers, those are lower level employees that their actions may not tie directly to the overall profitability of the company. You could have a great district manager and they have such an insignificant number of stores that even if they do everything right, it doesn't change the profitability of the company and the stock value doesn't change at all. But if the CEO makes a decision, they can change the stock value and the profitability overnight. So the more connected you are as an employee to that profitability and the ultimate value of the stock, the more likely you are to respond to equity compensation. There is a potential free rider problem, meaning that you could be a terrible employee and not do anything towards profit maximization. But if other people do, then you might still get higher price stock and get some equity compensation despite your lack of efforts. All right, equity compensation. The next one is tournament pay. Tournament pay is compensation based on the relative performance in a hierarchy. And this is common in big companies at the highest levels. So what companies will do is they'll set up a large prize for the top performer and a smaller prize for second place and so on. A CEO, for example, might get paid millions of dollars in a Fortune 500 company, but the vice president, maybe the person below the CEO, they might only get paid hundreds of thousands of dollars. So that movement from vice president to CEO is such a large increase in compensation. It's like winning the lottery. It's like winning a prize. So it creates a game that the lower level executives are working really hard to win. Because if you have, let's say, 5 vice presidents in a company, and they're all going to be competing for the CEO position when it opens up, well, that prize that they're going to get, that huge increase in income, is going to cause them to work a lot harder than they otherwise would. So it encourages workers to exert more effort in hopes of winning the top position. It's kind of like what you would see in athletics, sports, maybe in golf or something. The top prize could be tens of millions of dollars, and then second place is much less. So there's a huge incentive for those second place performers, second, third, fourth, fifth place performers, to really work hard to get that top prize. Competitors may also sabotage each other, decreasing productivity. So that's a concern with this, because it's one thing to have a tournament that incentivizes those executives to compete really vigorously to get that position. It's another thing to where they try to undermine each other. And if you want a good example of that, just look at the pursuit of the biggest prize in the US, which would be the presidency. And you can see there's a lot of effort that people running for president will go to. They'll work really hard to get that position because the big prize is there. But oftentimes, as we know, they do undermine each other, which lowers the overall productivity of the tournament pay. So you got to be careful about that. Take a look at some of the compensations over here. This is from 2017 and variety of U.S. companies and some of the highest paid CEOs. These numbers include all compensation. So this person, the CEO of Broadcom, Hock Tan, made $103 million. That could be salary combined with stock options, combined with performance bonuses, all sorts of things. In fact, most of the time, the salaries are nowhere near this. Some CEOs don't even take a salary. They just get paid based on things like stock options or profit sharing. But regardless, this is the pay. And you can imagine if you're at a level right below these CEO positions, how lucrative this is going to look. Because I can guarantee you that these companies, while they pay their CEOs a lot, the next level down is much less, could be even hundreds of thousands or in the low millions. So this is like winning the lottery, and those people will compete vigorously to get that position. Some outsiders will look at this high pay and they'll say, well, there's no way that somebody can generate that kind of productivity for a company. That's using marginal revenue product theory. Remember, you should only be paid by a company up to your marginal revenue product. So in theory, you'd say, well, Hock Tan should be paid up to the marginal product that is generated by him. However, that's not the way tournament pay works. It's probably true that Hock Tan does not generate $103 million and justify through his own productivity that kind of salary. But he doesn't have to, because if he's getting $103 million, maybe he's not even a productive worker. Maybe he only generates hundreds of thousands of dollars for the firm in terms of marginal revenue product. But as long as those that are beneath him, because of this huge prize that he's getting, that they want, if they compete with each other vigorously and end up producing over $100 million in value for the company, then their extra marginal revenue product offsets his lack of marginal revenue product. So a lot of CEOs, they don't justifiably generate the income that they're paid for the company. But they don't have to, because the extra productivity comes from those beneath them trying to win that prize. If tournament pay is going to be used, then the company needs to keep the tenure of the CEO short, because they got to keep openings available to incentivize those lower level executives to compete for the next opening. And this is what we actually see. Companies that do have really high compensation for their CEOs often have short tenure, whereas companies that have lower compensation for CEOs often have longer tenure. If you send the message that you're going to turn over your CEO every 10 or 20 years, then those lower level executives are not really going to be incentivized to compete for winning the CEO position. But if you send the message that you're going to turn over the CEO every 2 years, then those lower level executives are going to compete aggressively to get that prize. Windfall contracts are often called golden parachutes or golden handshakes, and these are provisions in executive contracts that provide protection against losing the full amount of the CEO prize in a takeover or termination. It's like an insurance policy. One of the risks that you take when you go into a CEO position is, on the one hand, you have a huge prize, right? You're going to get a high compensation, but there's a possibility the company's going to get taken over by someone like a Warren Buffett, these people that go out and buy up companies and replace the management. So that's a risk. And as insurance, a lot of these contracts provide for a payout in the event the company does get taken over. And those payouts can be large. Some of the payouts are in the tens of millions of dollars. This is one of the ways to get people to take CEO positions, because the CEO position is the most vulnerable position in a takeover. If Warren Buffett comes in and he takes over a company, you can almost be guaranteed he's going to fire the CEO and put somebody else in there. Well, imagine you just got the job. You say, yeah, I'm going to make $50 million a year this year, and 1 month into your tenure, Buffett comes in and takes over the company, and now you're gone. You wouldn't want to take that position because it's so risky. So windfall contracts provide for that protection. Another thing to consider is that companies may create these windfall contracts with the intent of deterring hostile takeovers. If a Warren Buffett sees that when he takes over a company, he's got to pay let's say $100 million golden parachute to the existing CEO to get rid of him, then that makes taking over that company much less desirable. So oftentimes corporations will use windfall contracts not only to incentivize CEOs to take the positions, but also to deter the company from being taken over. Okay, so that pretty much wraps up this video. You now have hopefully a better sense of how compensation systems can be used to deal with the principal agent problem and better align the behaviors of the managers and the workers with the goals of the owner, which is typically maximum profits. We'll pick up with the last two slides in a separate video to come. Thanks.